I think this event is pivotal and critical. I'm so happy to see the translation from science to active practical matters, the conjuncture of environment, of sustainability, of the EPA, of the FDA, of the Federal Trade Commission, in thinking globally about human health and human society and the role of omega-3 fatty acids from far back in time and far into the future. Adam didn't say it, so I'll say it. Thank you, Croda. Thank you, DSM. Thank you, EPAX. Thank you, Marine Nutraceutical. Thank you, Martech, Life Enriched. Thank you, Ocean Nutrition Canada, Wellness Through Innovation. Thank you, Superba Krill. Never saw you guys sponsor anything before. Glad you're on board. Nutrisource Diagnostics and New Hope Natural Media and Virgo Publishing. I will speak as a dinner speaker, which gives me latitude for fun and enjoyment and lets me kind of unwind a few things and go nowhere where no credible lipid scientist has gone before. My homework assignment from Adam Ishmael, very cleverly designing this, was to talk about mental health risks in the military. Well, I put together that talk, and I thought it was a little boring. So, we will talk about several things, but not without mentioning and describing explicitly that this presentation does not represent any policy or position of the U.S. federal government. It is solely the scientific, well, at least I think it's scientific opinion of the presenter. Critically for the U.S. military, here are the data on what costs money to the U.S. military. These guys are young. They don't have heart disease, and they're not afraid of death. You're not going to get to them by telling them you're going to prevent their heart from stopping. They're invincible. What they suffer from and what costs the U.S. military money is psychiatric and delivery disorders. So here, which I can't see any of them well. Here are the usage of inpatient hospital beds. 4 of the top 10, mood disorders, substance abuse, anxiety disorders are all psychiatric health disorders. And as Michael showed here, delivery, extended delivery problems from omega-3 deficiencies. My goal and my not-so-secret plan to change the world is to show the relationship of levels of omega-3 fatty acids on the x-axis and dollars in healthcare cost on the y-axis. And the U.S. military is the best case for forming this model because it is one of the few communistic systems left on Earth that takes care of everything and pays for the food and pays for the healthcare cost and has a top-down authoritative system. And it's full of rational people. If we can dial in the levels of omega-3 fatty acids and the healthcare costs to reduce the burden of the 25% of U.S. military people who are taking psychotropic medications to function, we have made a difference. Now, what is the credible data and what are the mechanisms that need to be in place to get from here to there? It's a long road and we're just starting it. Okay. First, what's important to the U.S. military? Psychiatric disorders and traumatic brain injury. The history of the scope of war is now that the IED has emerged as a novel weapon supplanting all others projectiles. And that guy observing that explosion will have traumatic brain injury from the shock waves. What's the tantalizing data that omega-3 fatty acids may be protective or helpful? This model is not exactly traumatic brain injury. It's ischemic injury to the brain where the middle cerebral artery is cut off for half an hour by a cuff and then released. Several days later, this side was not cut off from blood for half an hour. That side was cut off from blood for half an hour. Here, in the DHA condition, 3 hours after the injury, DHA was infused. That side was not cut off from blood. That side was cut off from blood. Even a politician can see the difference in these brains. Look at that. There's the 75% reduction in dead brain in the frontal cortex from administering reasonably small doses of omega-3 fatty acids 3 hours after the injury. Of course, the questions then become, what happens if you preload the animal or preload the person before they get the injury? And animal data is now quite compelling and quite convincing that you see very similar effects of protection from neuronal death. The mechanisms are lay in front of you of reducing inflammation, reducing the signal transduction of AKT and MAP kinases and caspases and the apoptotic pathways. We know the credible mechanisms by which this works. So if you want to save soldiers' brains and let them recover, consider letting them have a minimally adequate diet of omega-3 fatty acids. All right, so I'm going to give this to you as the comprehensive overview of what I'm trying to do and trying to put together here. So here's the sort of schematic. Before coming to the military, people live in society and eat societal determined diets in the US. They get basic training, they get deployed, they get a neurological injury, which is a combination of blast injuries and stress injuries. Stress injuries, if you're awake for 3 days at a time under combat fire, that's a stress injury. There is some kind of combination of neurological and psychiatric injury that results in a complex of suicide risk, depression risk, substance abuse risk, violence, PTSD, and frank neurological traumatic brain injury and other harms. So what can we do to start to think about and address this? The first is primary prevention. Is the nutritional status of our soldiers for their brain and psychiatric health adequate in society and in these parts where we can intervene? What are the two basic paradigms? Change their diet. I believe that you need to change tissue compositions by both raising long-chain omega-3s and backing off omega-6s. We have a paradigm for here which I'll show you later in this talk about swapping the oils and the foods in the current diets offered in order to raise tissue compositions. You can also go by supplements. There's some problems with supplements in terms of putting them into MREs and others. We need to have enough credible data built up to show that omega-3 fatty acids can, in a primary prevention paradigm, prevent suicidal behaviors and prevent combat-induced stress. And we can do this because these guys undergo intensive combat stress training. So you have a uniform dose of stress for 8 weeks. You get 1 meal a day, you hump 60 pounds on your back, and you're forced to stay up for 3 days at a time and make command decisions that either or let your comrades survive. It's a good paradigm. As a scientist, what's your omega-3 status before and after you do that training, which causes about a 60% dropout rate? All right, so after injury, we have another set of programs we're working on, including IV and enteral feedings post-injury, and also during rehabilitation. I'm not going to focus much of my talk on this. All right, so what about that primary prevention? Think about diet first, right? So this was developed by Bernadette Marriott, the former chief of the Office of Dietary Supplements in the Samuel Institute, presented in our conference on nutritional armor for the warfighter. So what do we do? Why focus on the garrison? Now, we heard talks about these meals ready to eat that people eat in the field. Well, that's fine, but it's a very small portion of their diet and a very small complement of their diet. What they're eating in their field probably matters a lot less than what they bring to the field with their adipose and tissue stores. Currently in the U.S., there is one MRE that has tuna in it, and it's not offered. The first strike rations have tuna, and they plan to expand a few, and then a unitized group ration where they're not in the field, but they're in a sort of smaller base, and you have 135 soldiers and 2 cooks, and they bring in ready-to-eat meals. They have the sources here. The only sources of omega-3 are shrimp scampi and raisin nut mix. Very robust sources. So we wanted to focus on looking at what do these people eat? Where are they getting their food? If you don't know the primaries of where they're getting your food, you can't change market, you can't change anything. So, first of all, here's breakfast across the services. Each service is denoted in a different color. So about 40% take it from home, about 17% get it from the U.S. Garrison food supply, 15% from the restaurant, and 40% just skip breakfast. Lunch, here we have better opportunity, 40% home meals, Garrison about 25-30%, restaurants near and off base 25-30%, and 15% omit the meal. And then dinner, you've got home foods, you've got Garrison foods at about 15%, and restaurant. So if you're looking at the actual foods, you serve them and then you can change directly. In the military, it's not a really great big component of their diet. You ultimately, in this model of society, of this paradigm, and the U.S. military represents the U.S. paradigm, ultimately you have to both change the composition of this food and change their cultural attitudes and diet selections from the home meals. You can't just do it by changing the military compositions. What can we change? What do we have the most direct change for is this U.S. military garrison diet. So 15% in military facility, 27% took out lunch from military facility, 18%. This is where we have an opportunity for change, and we had a model for change. So what kind of foods do they eat? Look at this, 50% are eating foods in the fast food category from restaurants of the Garrison line. What's the effect of that? You have an effect of the same prevalence of obesity probably in the U.S. military as elsewhere. Why did I show this slide? This slide was developed by a Marine. Can you tell? They like to poke fun. Look at this grin here. They're a little hostile to each other, you know, but not as hostile as they are to their enemies. All right, so what's a Garrison food line? Garrison food line, you have a Garrison, you have 3 different food lines that you can line up for. You want the main food line, you want the fast food line, you want the salad line. So main food line, cafeteria sides, meals, fast food, grab and go, specialty bars, salad and deli. We can't do too much of this. We find a little bit of tuna in this. We find one catfish meal offered in 30 days food supply in this meal line. We modeled, we got the data, I like economic data. We got the data for the U.S. Garrison in Okinawa and all of the meals that they served and all of the food they put through all those food lines for the month of February in 2009. So there were 507 different recipes offered in the main line. We calculated out the short chain and long chains from those recipes. We corrected for the number of servings. You know, you got 250 servings of, you know, the chicken, and you got 3 fish sandwiches, and you adjust for that. Sum the grams of omega-3 and omega-6s from the food lines, convert it to energy percent, calculate the food delivery for 28 days, and then calculate what goes in the mouth to what we're going to predict occurs in the tissue Now here I use the parameter omega-6 fatty acids as a percentage of the biological active pool of long-chain fatty acids, because we happen to think that omega-6 fatty acids, especially arachidonic, have biological importance. I don't know if the rest of you do, but I do. You know, I know that there's about 2 or 3 components of arachidonic acid that may be anti-inflammatory and may be helpful, and I know there's about 500 or 600 of them that are pro-inflammatory and dangerous. So I think the balance of omega-3s and omega-6s is pretty important. So we look at, you know, what's the percentage? Are you 50-50 omega-6s and omega-3s in your body like the Mediterraneans? Or are you like 80% omega-6s like the US? So we can predict that. We can predict that tissue composition from the foods you eat and the composition of the foods you eat on a macroeconomic level. So how do you do it? Well, you can, you know, the prediction from long-chain omega-3s in the diet directly to the omega-3 index, for example, is you can do it, but it's not great when you're below 4 energy percent from linoleate. Above 4 energy percent of linoleate, that's a pretty good, robust predictor. What you really need is Dr. Land's equation, which looks at the interaction of the short and long-chain omega-6s competing for the FADS enzyme for tissue composition, and the direct consumption of arachidonate in the long chains to the tissue and the omega-3s. Sorry the world isn't simpler, but it's the way it is. But we have an equation, and it predicts robustly either the percentage of omega-6s in HUFAs or omega-3s. It's an inverse, right? 50-50, same omega-3s. So you could do it backwards. Omega-3s in HUFA, that sells better, right? Or omega-6s. Either way. At any rate, these 2 tissue parameters are interconvertible because they're linearly related, and you can both Lands and Harris have published the relationships that you can easily interconvert reliably between either of those indexes. The advantage here is that you can robustly predict this tissue index from diet. I know you geeks wouldn't be bored by this. I mean, this is, you know. So how do we do this? What's going on here? Okay, so I showed you that. So this is the current recipes, and we calculate all this out and make a tissue comparison. And then what we do is we take exactly the same recipes, right? But instead of regular chicken, we put in, well, actually, first we put in the egg, which answered an important scientific question. So first we calculated omega-3 enriched eggs, swap out standard eggs for omega-3 enriched eggs, then standard chicken for omega-3 rich chicken, then standard for omega-3 enriched pork. We didn't even go exotically with all the different food components and all wonderful possibilities that all you guys would just love to sell to the military and boost their diet and change their recipes. We didn't even go there yet. And of course we can push it farther. We just went with, you know, the basics. So that's all the swapped recipes, and we also took out the omega-6 fatty acid oils and replaced them with high oleic oils. And then we also compared current recipes to current recipes plus just give them 3 grams a day of salmon oil and saw what we can do to tissue compositions. So here we are, here's the swap, 507 different recipes, 107 recipes we identified we could change the omega-3 content of, we swapped 8 representative days, total number of servings sampled 3,287, total calories sampled 4,600,000 and some odd calories. Good enough data to sort of be representative. Here's the oil differences, here's the common oil used, US deep fry soybean oil, about 37% linoleate omega-6, monounsaturates. Here's a comparison. They use a little bit of canola oil, and here we swapped this one with Plenish and brought the linoleate down from 37% to a very small percent and replaced it with oleic. So we gave a chance for the ALA to be free, to convert. We gave it hope. So I told you we did the eggs first. So here's, you know, the DHA content of regular USDA eggs And one of the commercially available eggs here, and it less arachidonate, and then chickens that are not yet commercially available, and you can see the shift towards long chain omega-3s and short chain omega-3s here. And we got our hands on some nice pork data. Here the USDA says that there aren't any long chain omega-3 fatty acids in pork. They're probably not true, but there's certainly more than there. And so here's the bottom line of what we can do to that U.S. Garrison main line without changing a single recipe, without insisting they eat fish on Fridays. We predict the main line, you'll get about 75, 80% omega-3 in HUFA, or omega-6 in HUFA. That would be the standard diet, and that's only about 25% omega-3 in HUFA. Just by swapping the recipes, we can bring that down to about 55. And if you did the current recipes, just add 3 grams a day of salmon oil, but you have to make sure people take them every day, all day, for years and years and years. It was a compliance issue mentioned this morning. This is the stealth health approach. And even in the fast food line, if you're reading the fast food line, we can make the fast food line healthier. Now, we could potentially do swapped foods plus supplements, and then you're getting down to Bjorn Derberg's Icelandic or Eskimo, better towards Eskimo levels. We can do this. This is achievable if you want to do it in the U.S. military. So why would you want to do it? Well, what's the credible data that there's a link to mental health outcomes or problems? Okay, suicide rates, this was from 2008. They doubled from 2005 to 2008. Now they've doubled again from 2008 to 2010, with December 2010 being the highest rates of suicide deaths in the U.S. military in history. So we have data, randomized double-blind placebo-controlled data on people with deliberate self-harm and suicide from a study in Dublin, 49 subjects, 12 weeks, double-blind trial, 2 grams a day, EPA plus DHA, EPAX 550 from Pronova. We robustly showed a 50% reduction in depressive symptoms. This is a 45, not 35% reduction in suicidal thinking, 33% reduction in the perception of stress, and my favorite parameter, a 30% improvement in happiness. It was robust. We only needed 50 subjects to demonstrate this. We did not need, for cardiovascular outcomes, 10,000 subjects over 5 years. If you want to meet the criteria of efficacy in randomized placebo-controlled trials to meet FTC, and FDA criteria, it's a heck of a lot faster and easier to do it for psychiatric outcomes than cardiovascular prevention, in my opinion. At any rate, back to suicide. So we asked, does the serum suicide status of military folks increase risk? This is a case control study where we identified 800 military suicide deaths, the largest biological study of suicide ever conducted, and matched to 800 controls from the Armed Forces AFHSC. And the serum repository has 9.3 million serum samples from the U.S. military sitting in freezers, waiting for money to analyze them for all kinds of omega-3 fatty acid. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted there. So we pulled 800 and then 800 carefully matched controls by age, gender, rank, duty categories, and availability of serum, and asked if the low serum omega-3 status increased risk of suicide death. So the first thing we noticed was that everybody is just pitifully low in their omega-3 fatty acid status. A sample of 1,600 people, right? So there's the N3 in HUFA, a mean of 17. So 83% of their fatty acids are arachidonic acid, and only 17% are EPA and DHA, right? Here's a sample of 5,000 500 7-year-olds in England that we ran pretty much at the same time, and the 7-year-olds from England have better omega-3 fatty acid status than our US military. Mind you, by the way, we were able to do all of these 60,000 samples because we have a high throughput robotic fatty acid analysis system which does analytical chemistry on an epidemiological scale. So if you have a need to get 10,000 or 20,000 fatty acid samples done at, I don't know, $25 a sample, come talk to me, you know, we'll help you out with that. I don't know if anybody's interested in that. I'm distracted. All right, so they're pitifully low. And so here's the world diversity. Here's for the Mr. Fit data, the 5 quintiles of omega-3 fatty acid and HUFA status. There's 50-50 right there, about an omega-3 index of 12. And the US military is down there at 17. UK 7-year-olds were about there, and giving about 2 grams of omega-3 fatty acids were there. Now, I don't know exactly what the relation, you know, how we can predict psychiatric illness here, but that's the world diversity, and that's where they were. So we're looking at, in this study, very low levels and a very narrow range, and you would expect to find nothing. What we did find is when you split these up by quintiles, when you get to this level, about a mean fatty acid DHA level of 2, that's when the risk protection starts to kick in. So it turns out that about 95% of the sample is at risk for depression at about 1.5, 1.75 increased risk. So this was the only sample that was a little bit protected out of that sample. Now, this isn't satisfying, right? Because we're only at 0.6 to 2 for DHA, and that doesn't reflect world diversity. What we can extrapolate from here, because not enough people are even eating omega-3s, we can make a proper assessment. The best we can do to extrapolate is to look at the world diversity from 0.7 to about 7, a 10-fold, and fortunately Tomohito Hamazaki published data in China splitting into quartiles, and see here the bottom quartile had a mean of 2.7. They were higher, the bottom quartile was higher than the top of the US military, and had a dose-response effect of lower suicide risk spanning almost 7-fold from the highest levels of DHA to the lowest levels. Now, when we did that study in Ireland, we moved them from there to there. So it's good, tantalizing data that this is important. Is it compelling enough to make a policy change? No. Do we need a whopping big study? You betcha. Am I ready to do it? I stand ready to serve. So here, I just want to touch on suicide a bit more. These subjects got fatty acid status before discharge and a PET scan. Those with high DHA, 1 out of 16 had a future suicide attempt over 900 days. Low DHA status, 50% had a future suicide attempt over 900 days. Let's look at the PET scan data. So those people who had a future suicide attempt, they had hyperactivity in the limbic forebrain, the amygdala and anterior cingulate. There, and there, and there, and there. This is the pattern that you'd expect to see in major depression. This is the pattern you'd expect to see in PTSD. You have hyperactivity of this limbic system, highly correlated to distress, kind of like having your foot on the emotional gas of distress. What's the relationship? Here is the diversity 0.7 to about 7 DHA. Lower DHA predicts minus R of minus 8.7. Lower DHA predicts hyperactivity of that very same region of distress. So I'd say your DHA is low, your foot is on the emotional gas. Do I have a specific mechanism for you? No. Have I showed change in this to show it's causal? No. Is it compelling? I think so. The other finding is that the cortical region, which acts as an emotional brake in suicide attempters, is not active. So the foot's on the emotional gas, the cortex tries to regulate the emotions, especially when giving an after-dinner talk, tries to regulate the emotions and, modulate stuff, but that brake is not working. And in this study, for some reason, low DHA status was also associated with hypoactivity of that region. Now we're getting ready for the transition part of my talk, so just fasten your seat belts. Okay? So I had to become a student of neuroanatomy, figure out what the heck do these brain regions do? What's going on when the cortex, which regulates things, is interacting with the amygdala? So I opened myself to look at the data, and I found, well, this is the primary circuit for consolidating memory, and consolidating memory around emotion and perception. That is to say that a red light to a dog has no meaning. If you keep the dog hungry and show them the red light and then give them food, the red light is now paired with the emotion of satiety and the emotion of reward. Red light, reward. Red light, reward. Red light, reward. Beautiful monograms associated with purity. Right? This is how we learn. This is how we give symbols meaning, is we associate them with emotion. It's a fundamental neurological process. So how does it happen? The cortex sees, visual cortex, transmits the information to the limbic cortex, especially the gate of the amygdala, which gates so many emotions. And how close is this association? The amygdala sits right on top of the hippocampus, the memory consolidator, and gates all of that emotional stuff down into memory. And then it reprojects back up into the cortex to associate it. So you get red dresses, you get red roses, you get poetry, you get all of those things in your history and your context of what you've heard in your life and associated with memory, and these subtle and beautiful associative paradigms, driven by the emotional valence. Okay? So, what happens if we change the emotional valence? So here's a pregnant military woman, and you know that now because I just told you that, right? No other information that she's pregnant. And her husband goes to the market and buys a nice fish, roasts it up, it's dinner, honey. And she says, "Oh, I heard that EPA advisory, and that's nasty." How does she know it? Because the memory consolidation, she sees it, goes in to say, what's the memory of that? Well, it's a nasty mercury-laden emotion, and I'm not going to eat it. Nasty is bad. Food labeled as bad is not pure, and it's nasty. Well, the husband says, I've been, going to these websites and reading this fish stuff, and these omega-3 scientists say it's okay, and your mom ate it, so eat the fish. And the EPA and DHA come up and hit that emotional center and change its color, and changes the emotional valence and the meaning. If you do it enough times, does the meaning change because of the biological properties, the psychoactive properties of the molecules? Let's see if we do that again. All right. Repetition is the mother of learning. Okay. Now, we psychiatrists happen to think that not everything happens consciously, and sometimes unconscious associations occur. So then, if fish has emotional properties of calmness, peacefulness, less depression, niceness, then what have been the naturally occurring meanings of the symbol of fish? What have been the naturally occurring meanings of the symbol of fish? Why is that blue sustainability fish logo resonant throughout the world? Well, let's look at culture. Let's look at the data that presents itself to us through history. What are the images of fish? What are they associated with? So here's, you know this, fish on Friday. This is Kuan Yin. These are Persians. The priests are the only ones who could eat fish on Fridays and wear the fish, becoming fish, as priests in ancient Samaria. So we did a test. Well, before that, I want to say, why am I going here? Because I want to change the diet of the military. Are they going to change their diet for fear of cardiovascular disease? No, these guys are fearless. They're not going to die. Are they going to change their diets for health reasons? Yes. Are they going to change the diets because they believe the food is going to make them better? They sure are. I put this here not as an indictment of atheists, and I'm not an atheist, I'm a biologist. It's a different belief system and religion. It's an indictment of foxholes, that we don't want to have so many foxholes and so many wars in the world. This guy's not dead, by the way, he's just exhausted. So we need to look at the cultural symbols of fish and what it means to change the home meals, to change the garrison meals. So we did work in testing this hypothesis, and we asked and actually published in 2006 this question. If there's a strong biological association between fish consumption and the reduction of depression, aggression, violence, and better health, if that biological association is there for changing the brain, are fish also symbolically associated with happiness, peace, harmony across cultures independently and across time independently? So we could test this with the culturally available data. And I'm just going to give you a schematic, because it's a dinner presentation, to give you a feel for what we found, Laura Rice and I. So here's Judaism. This is images from before Exodus. From no Orthodox table is fish absent for more than one Sabbath meals, however difficult it may be to procure. We had some marketing stuff on that. Right? Hirsch, the Jewish Encyclopedia, 2002. Just as the fish in the sea are covered by water and the evil eye has power over them, so the evil eye has no power over the seed of Joseph. This Talmud. Here's a bit pre-Judaic. The tradition of eating fish on Fridays is far pre-Christian. It came from Judaism, and before Judaism, it came from Samaria and Mesopotamia. And here's Onus. There's also Enki and Dagon, who were both fish gods, and that's where the origin of fish on Fridays and that religious thing started. So here's Islam. Here from the Quran. The Holy Quran has a separate rule identifying fish as lawful or purifying. Lawful for you is the game of the sea and its use as food, and lawful is also purifying. Now, I had some caution in presenting this slide because I knew the FTC representative was here, okay? And now you might interpret this purifying as a health claim, okay? And I wanted to be cautious here because if it's, I don't know if there's enough data here that this is a health claim and this is a big organization that the FTC and FDA may go after and write letters of warning to Islam saying that they must retract this statement from their public media materials. So I was just a little cautious, and I think we'll work with lawful instead of purifying, okay? Fish are provided for those who keep the Sabbath. Ask them concerning the towns standing close to the sea. Behold, they transgressed the matter of the Sabbath. For on the day of their Sabbath, usually the fish came to them openly with their heads above the water. But on the day they did not keep the Sabbath, talking about a Jewish group, they did not keep the Sabbath, the fish came not. And made a trial for they who transgressed. And, Satan stole a fish from Moses. There's all kind of great stuff there. So, Judaism, Islam, priests, turmeric. Chinese medicine and culture is absolutely, from a cultural anthropological point of view, just lays this out in brilliant, fabulous, unequivocal statements, right? You have a disorder of health. It's because your energies of yin and yang are imbalanced. It disrupts your physical health, your mental health, and your family. You need to, as early in the 1980s, if someone went to a traditional medicine doctor asked, what do you eat? The dietary survey, food frequency questionnaire, validated by Harvard. Well, maybe they do other things, but they find out what you eat, and they balance your diet, so that the yin-yang energies are balanced by the yang energies. And you eat yin foods to quiet down the yang energies. What are the yin calming foods? The most yin calming archetypal food is cold water seafood. And the most yang foods, meats, fried foods, spicy foods, hot foods. It's probably all just coincidence. So Buddhism, here there's only one animal that is allowed to represent aspects of Buddha's body. Everything else is a graphic. The only singular animal is two fish. Arching bodies. Fish also connote the life-giving properties of water, represent spiritual release from the ocean, and samsa. A lot of stuff in Buddhism. We're just kind of giving an overview here. Hinduism, Lord Vishnu, second member of the Hindu Trinity. Vishnu is said to be the preserver and sustainer of life, upholds the universal laws of righteousness and truth. The two major gods, Brahma and Shiva, are considered creator and destroyer of the universe respectively, right? But the sustainer and righteousness and truth, his first incarnation is as a fish god. And his last incarnation is a fish god. Ganges, Ganga, the sacred river of Ganges, is, of course, inhabited by the god Ganga, the goddess of the Ganges River, most sacred body. Hindus believe that bathing in her holy waters will help wash away one's sins. Hence, conduct repeated ritualistic washings to secure a place in heaven. Her power to wash away sins and liberate is so strong that the ashes of the dead are spread over her. She is usually represented as a beautiful woman with a fish tail in place of legs. It's a very powerful image of cleansing all sin through fish. We hear that in other religions. Here's Shinto, here's Ibusi, I can't say his name right. He's the only one depicted with an animal and a fisher. He's got a big red sea bream. And he's the deity of prosperity of one's occupation, considered to be a deity of the rice paddies and fishing villages. He's believed to ensure good catches. He's venerated as the deity of the kitchen, usually depicted as a sea bream. And he is sort of the god of happiness and, fish and happiness. And here's 1,000 of them having fun. And there's a beer in Japan named after him. So that's pretty cool. And then there's a group of religions that we're more familiar with in Western culture. So Clement of Alexandria, one of the fathers of the Christian church, in 1244, noted that the Greek words ichthos and Christos were interchangeable and identical, that fish is Christ and Christ is fish. Now this symbol here, this cross, is kind of an old symbol in Christianity. It comes in 450 years after the birth of Christ with the Council of Naxos and the consolidation of the Bible. Prior to that time, and incorporation of crucifixion and resurrection as a central part of the faith. Before that, this was the symbol of Christ. So the miracles of Jesus are also fascinating and wonderful to look at in considering that all religions revere compassion, but especially Christianity talks about the reduction of violence and the ability to turn the other cheek. What symbolically is there? What the only miracle that is repeated 3 times in the New Testament is the multiplication of fish. Twice with loaves of fishes and once after resurrection. It's remarkable. Now, I don't know how we can do a double-blind, placebo-controlled trial of this. I ate a lot of fish oils, but I sank. I don't know. Maybe the Dead Sea. I don't know. Here is the identity of the Pope. This is the Pope's Great Seal ring in which papal encyclicals, papal declarations are made, and you seal it with the ring. This is the Word of God. This is the word of the Pope. This is named the Ring of the Fisherman. Why is it named the Ring of the Fisherman, and why does the Pope wear fisherman's sandals? The reason is from John 21, and the first 1 through 12 verses describe that this is the third revelation of Jesus to the disciples after resurrection. It describes that they cast the net to the right and catch 153 great fish, and they bring them to the shore and roast them and recognize that this is indeed the Lord God resurrected and come among them. And they're eating, and after dinner, Jesus has a little dinner talk with Peter, and he says, "So when they dined, Jesus say unto Simon Peter, Simon, son of Christ, lovest thou me more than these?" So what's he talking about? Well, they just had a miraculous catch that nearly broke their nests, brought them in. Do you love me more than you love these, what we just ate? Well, he saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest I love thee. He saith unto him, Feed my lambs. He saith unto him a second time, Simon, son of Jonas, love me more than you love these. He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou lovest. No, I love these. He saith unto him, Feed my sheep. He saith unto him a third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter is grieved because he said a third time, reversing the 3 denials. Lovest thou me? He said to him, Lord, thou knowest thou love all things, and thou know I lovest thee. Jesus said to him, got my attention? Yeah, do I have your attention? Peter, feed my sheep. This is the theological core of the justification of Peter becoming the first pope of the Catholic Church. The classical theological interpretation is feeding the sheep and feeding the lambs the Word of God. Let's get a little more literal. How about both? The fish and the Word, because ichthos and Christos is identical. How about you feed people the teachings of Christ and calmness and passivity and to create a more unified world, and you change their brains at the same time so that they're peaceful, calmer, happier, etc. Well, can there be theologically this duality, for example, in Catholicism, between the spiritual and the physical? So here is the Catholic Encyclopedia of 1917, which carries the imprimatur of the Catholic Church. The Church has so wisely, and with foreknowledge of scientific investigation and present proof so accurate as to be almost supernatural in framing her laws regarding abstinence. The laws regarding abstinence described from Vatican I, 1242 to 1246, that you every Friday should abstain from meat and eat fish and turtles and other things on Wednesdays and on Christian feast days, 180 days out of 365, calculate the number of meals a week, calculate the omega-3 content of the fish that they're eating, you come to about a gram a day. I'm not making it up. The history of mankind seems to show that while meeting investigations of the earth have been the most powerful, aggressive, and sanguinity, growing, in other words, from the things that they feed on. So, here you go. I think that this is useful knowledge. Here's a bit that I found particularly useful in practical life. I got my kids to eat fish by putting honey on it. It was real simple. Right? Where did I get the idea? Look, I did a Google search on fish in the Bible, come up with all the verses, right? So this is cool. This is real neat. Here's Luke 24. Behold my hands and feet, that it is I myself. Handle me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones, as you see that I have. And when he had spoken, and he showed them his hands and feet, which had the nail, they believed not for joy and wondered. And he said among them, do you have any meat? You got anything to eat? Right? Generally showed, right? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish and honeycomb, and he took it and did eat it before them. Next line, 43, 44. And said unto them, these are the words I spake unto you while I was yet with you, and these things were fulfilled and written in the law of Moses and the prophets and in the Psalms concerning me. This is interpreted at Christ revealing that he is the Messiah. Just coincidence, he ate fish and then said he's the Messiah. Right? Then he opened their understanding that they might understand the scriptures. And then line 45, and then 51, it came to pass, he blessed them and parted to them and was carried up into the heavens. Right? So the last meal Christ can eat, assuming that he can choose to anything he wants, is broiled fish and honeycomb. That's very interesting. It helped getting my kids to eat fish. Mind you, I'm a biologist. That's my religion. This is just data. This is data from many different religions. And we can use this data or ignore this data. My student, Laura Rice, we're like 3 months into this cultural anthropological investigation. She tugs on my shoulder. Wonderful young woman, bright as a whip. Dr. Hibbeln, you're wrong. What are you talking about? I'm wrong. I don't want to hear that. You're wrong. You're right that, there's no associations of fish and violence and aggression, except for men. But you're right about that, all that cultural stuff, but you're wrong that the religion is the most powerful and most prevalent image of fish in cultures and society. You're right, it is associated with that stuff, but that's not the most powerful one. And I'm glad that I had hired a female student because she said, think about mermaids. And think about the importance of fish and fertility and sensuality and sexuality, and I would, from a Michael Crawford perspective, those things that ensure that your genes get into the next generation. And think about the association of fish and fertility. So here's T.S. Eliot, shall I part my hair, do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear flannel trousers and walk along the beach. I have heard the mermaids singing each to each. They sing, I do not think they sing to me. I've seen them riding waves of seaweed waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown black. When the wind flows, the water white and black, and it goes on. But here's the point. Fish and sexuality. Here's deeply ingrained in our culture. This is one of the 12 signs of the zodiac. Pisces. Now you will ever remember that the names of those two fish are Aphrodite and Eros, are Venus and Cupid. And the lore is that these fish started out as gods. Here the myth describes the mother and son strolling on the riverbank. They encountered a giant. They were frightened. They jumped into the river and assumed the form of fish. Then the other gods elevated them up into the sky to be in the zodiac. And forever they were known as Venus and Cupid to the Romans, and there you are. Pretty good, wonderful stuff for life. And here's Venus, right? Where's she born? She's born on the half shell, man. She's shellfish. Right? That's the paradigm of beauty. We've got to listen to these messages. Here's one I really like from the Babylonian Talmud, Judaic tradition. As a reward, and I think I like reward because of the effects of omega-3 fatty acids supporting dopamine and dopamine reward mechanisms, which is part of the talk tomorrow. As a reward for the righteous women who lived that generation that the Israelites were delivered from Egypt, when they went to draw water, the Holy One, blessed be He, arranged that small fishes should enter their pitchers, which they drew up half full of water and half full of fishes. Then they set the 2 pots on the fire, one for hot water and the other for fish. And they carried them to their husbands in the field, and washed, anointed, fed, gave them to drink, and had intercourse with them among the sheepfolds to generate the progeny of Israel. So, fish as reward. Aphrodite, it's Syrian, a lot of Syrian traditions here, and Agatharis, she was a troublemaker. She was the one, there's these letters from the Corinthians, Paul to the Corinthians. Why was Paul trying to change the Corinthians? Because the Corinthians had public orgies and naughty behavior in worship of Agatharis, who was a fish god. And we had a better fish god. So here's conclusion number 2. In the scope of humanity, warfighters would really rather not fight war. Warfighters would really rather to be home with their wives, their husbands, and their families, living peaceful, coherent, cohesive lives. And so these wider societal questions really provoke to me these issues of what does it mean to have a societal-wide, multi-generational, profound omega-3 deficiency? Thank you for your attention.